Hello and welcome back to Principles of Macroeconomics. I am your host, Dr. B. Today is the final lecture throughout our course together. I hope that you've all enjoyed these lectures and our discussions and your time during the macroeconomics course here at UDC in fall 2021. It has been my honor and pleasure to work with all of you, and I hope that you all stay in touch as I am looking forward to attending your graduation. So, before we jump into our final chapter, I do want to quickly highlight where we are in the classroom as a reminder. This is the final week and the final chapter of this course. What that means is you will have a Chapter 23 homework assignment that will be due on December 5th, 2021, which is the final day of all classes here at UDC for the fall 2021 semester. So if you have any remaining work that has not yet been submitted, please do so by no later than December 5th, 2021. I cannot accept any work past that date due to university policy. In addition to that, the following week you will have your final exam. The final exam is due by December 12th, 2021, which is the final day of final exams. I absolutely must have it complete by that date. It may be earlier than that, in fact, and if that is the case, I'll send out an announcement. The final exam will cover week 9, chapter 12, through week 15, chapter 23, which is what we're going to be talking about today. It is 20 questions, true, false, multiple choice, open book, open note, open lecture, open everything. You can save it, come back to it, all that good stuff, and then submit it when you're ready. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our last discussion for the semester. And that discussion, my friends, is on macroeconomic policy and debates over such policy. As you know, economics is deeply rooted in theory and in practice. And these theories and practices ultimately change from time to time. A lot of it has to do with policymakers and their debates over economics. Sometimes policymakers try to stabilize the economy through enacting various policies. There is fiscal and monetary policy that our policymakers examine from time to time. The Federal Reserve, central banks, try to reduce inflation, manage it, some degree control it. And a lot of it has to do with government spending and how the government tries to balance a budget from time to time. Most of the time we're running a deficit. And a lot of it has to also do with changes in tax law and reform to savings, and etc. Interest rates, you name it. So some debates for macroeconomic policy. Should policymakers try to stabilize the economy? Why or why not? If left on its own, it will fluctuate. Of course it will. Anything left on its own will do whatever it wants. It'll go up and down. That's how it should work. In my personal opinion, I don't believe the government should be involved in economics at all. They should leave it to its own devices. Let it be natural. But of course, we don't want it to fall on its face, so there's some changes, of course, that can be argued for or against. Households should be able to run their own economics, in my opinion. Policies tend to try to stabilize the economy using monetary and fiscal policies to stabilize aggregate demand, output, and unemployment. Of course, stable economies are good for everyone involved, but of course, there's always going to be some give and take within any economy. Some believe that the economy should be left alone through its own devices. But of course, if nothing's done, then it could get very bad and ultimately land on its face. Some fluctuations are unpredictable, forecasting is very difficult, and there's a lot of work to be done in this area. What if the government tries to fight recessions by spending a lot more, cutting taxes? Is it a good or bad thing? That depends on who you talk to. Recessions is when unemployment is very high, inflation is low, and economic output is low. How do we combat recessions? Well, typically what happens is the government will create a spending plan, like an infrastructure bill that we're seeing here in 2021, or an American Recovery Act that we saw in 2020, or Jobs and Tax Cut Act that we saw in 2016, or a America something that 2009, right? List goes on and on. The government loves to spend money. We know that. But is too much spending a bad thing? The government taxes its citizens to pay for these spending things. That's how it gets paid for. Nothing's ever paid for by anyone else other than the taxpayers. The taxpayers in the United States are the ones that pay for everything in this country. Don't let any of these politicians fool you. Nothing is free. There is no such thing as free money. It is paid for by the taxpayers and the future taxpayers. Ultimately, this country will pay for the spending that our Congress is doing through taxes. That is how it is paid for. You will see higher taxes in the future. There's no other way to pay for things. I want you to understand that. There's nothing for free. It doesn't exist. Most states balance their budgets. The federal government, on the other hand, that's obviously not true. When there are times of recession, on the state level, they will cut jobs, they'll cut jobs. They don't have enough money, right? That's what recession means. They'll cut jobs, which raises unemployment, and they'll also cut taxes to cut the burden on the individuals. But it's difficult. It's very difficult to manage it times of recession. The states do a great job of balancing their budgets, but the federal government, on the other hand, makes it very difficult. At times of recession, one of the best methods is to reduce taxation. If you reduce taxation, households will have more money in their pockets to spend money on what they decide to spend money on. And with that, we leave it to the individuals to decide what to spend their money on that they've earned. The tax savings, they might invest that money, they might spend that money, which will ultimately prop up the economy naturally. That really is, in my opinion, the best thing that the government can do in order to improve economic conditions. The Federal Reserve has their hands on the levers. A few weeks ago, I gave the example of the hot and cold water. The Federal Reserve always has their hands on the hot and cold water as a result to monetary policy. The government will decide to spend more or spend less, raise taxes, reduce taxes. And all of these things have an impact on things like growth rates and inflation. With greater government spending comes greater growth, but it also comes with greater inflation. With less government spending, there is lower growth rates and ultimately lower inflation, but it results in higher unemployment. So it's a balancing act, and this balancing act comes from the Federal Reserve and from Congress. Some believe that the Federal Reserve and Congress should have less power as a result to things like government spending and from all of these other things that they do. And some believe that that should be left up to the open market, allowing banks, central banks, to make these types of decisions. Discretion, if left to monetary policy, causes fluctuations in the business cycle. So we can see that there are arguments for and against the idea of allowing the Fed and the Congress to make these types of decisions. The Fed does have some flexibility to react to unforeseen events like a pandemic, where they will lower interest rates, increase government spending to prop the economy up in the event that something happens. And they also have the ability to kind of react a little faster than it would be for a central bank. What about inflation? How do we combat inflation? Well, we know that inflation is caused by too much government spending, which causes higher prices and lower unemployment. To some degree, that's a good thing because we know that in the short run, low unemployment and high inflation are correlated. We also know that it's not good in the short term because it means higher prices for everyone. So what should the government try to do? Should they try to aim for zero inflation? Or what should the central bank try to do, aim for zero inflation? The thing about that is that zero means there's going to be a cost. If we try to keep inflation low, it'll cost us gross domestic product. So we'll have lower output and higher unemployment. So it's difficult to achieve zero inflation. In fact, zero inflation, in my opinion, is unattainable. It's unrealistic. The idea here is that we want inflation to exist, but to a small degree, a low percentage, like 2%. We know that it costs us to reduce inflation to zero. It costs us in gross domestic product. So with that, should inflation be reduced to zero? The short answer is probably not. I think it would cost us too much in the long run with respect to gross domestic product and output. Should the government try to balance its budget? That's a silly question, in my opinion. Yes, they should. Stop spending so much money. Here in the United States, we are running about an $18 to $20 trillion deficit. That is unheard of. We are spending way more money than we're taking in. If that happened in a household, the household would go broke and everyone would be homeless. That's how that works. But the government has the ability to spend money. The household does not. It is best for the government to learn how to balance a budget in the long run. But we know that that's not always the case. It's very difficult to do that for the government because certain things happen over time, like, I don't know, a pandemic. They had to spend money to keep people from losing their homes. Sure, I agree with that. I do. I'm for that. But what I'm not for is spending more money for other things that they should not be spending money on, because that adds to the deficit. The government should learn to spend within its means, especially during times of peace and stability. The reason why the government spends more money than they should is because they are trying to do the best by their people, by the citizens of this country. I agree with that to some degree, but at the rate that it's happening, it becomes a challenge. This idea of free things comes at a cost. It comes at the cost of the taxpayers ultimately, because we know that nothing is free. Should the government engage in tax reform to encourage saving? Yes, of course they should. Higher savings results in greater capital accumulation. I encourage all of my students to have some savings. You need savings. Why? For the future. You need to have a better you in the future. Well, how do you do that? Save some money. When you save, it creates stability. You'll have what this thing called an emergency fund. Something happens, you will need the money to be there. So I encourage all of you to try to save money in the long run. I also encourage the government to try to do the same. Our country seriously does need tax reform. We know this. We have very high tax rates for both corporate and for individuals. Now, in 2016, yes, the government tried to do this through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to reduce corporate rates to the highest of 21%, which I think is good to a degree. But there are still way too many loopholes in the tax system. If everyone is forced to pay taxes, it needs to be fair across the board. Everyone should pay into the system to some degree. Now, of course, some people say that there should be no changes to the tax system, that it works the way it is. Most of the people that are saying that are very wealthy, and taxes does not have an impact on those people. Yeah, it's the case in the United States. So in conclusion, throughout the past 15 weeks, we've been in this thing and talking about all these policies and all these things the government does. We talked about a lot of equations. I want you to take away one thing from this class, and that is that we all contribute to the economy in one way, shape, or form. We all are the economy. In the United States, the country was designed for the people, by the people, for the people. The same is said with our economy. We have an open economy here in the United States. And that economy is working well for everyone, whether you feel it or not. And I want you to keep in mind that there is no such thing as anything being free. We all pay for it in taxes. We all pay for it in one way, shape, or form. So, moving forward, please be involved with the economy. Be involved with your politics. Be involved with your economy. Be involved with your family. And do the best you can to contribute to this economy. So in summary, there are a lot of debates around the economy. There's a lot of rulemaking and there's a lot of opposing viewpoints and decisions. But all in all, it is the responsibility of everyone to create the best economy we can. And with that, my friends, I'll also say that it's important to do your best to fight recessions, encourage tax cuts during the times of recessions, encourage tax hikes at the time of economic booms, encourage growth at the time of need, encourage stability at the time when things are good. Encourage Congress to reduce inflation by spending less and to stabilize our economy, which will ultimately reduce our prices that we're all paying. And things will become better once the government learns how to balance a budget. You know, these decisions that Congress makes, we're all involved by everything that they decide. And with that, my friends, this is our final lecture. If you have comments, questions, or concerns about the debates over macroeconomic policy, please feel free to email me, call me, set up office hours. I am here for you 100% of the time. And since this is our final lecture, I'd like to remind you of what's due. Back in week 3, week 9, we had the week 12 quiz. Chapter 12 quiz, sorry. The chapter 12 through chapter 23, which we just completed, will be on your final exam. The final exam will occur next week. For this week, you need to complete the chapter 22 homework from the previous chapter and this chapter's 23 homework. Please complete both of those assignments by no later than December the 5th. December the 5th is the last day of the semester, which is the last day of all classes. All of your work must be completed by then. I will not be able to accept anything past December 5th due to university policy. The final exam must be completed by December the 12th and not a minute later than December the 12th. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, you need help with anything, please feel free to email me, call me, set up office hours. And with that, my friends, I wish you all the best with your future. I strongly encourage you to stay in touch with me. I'm looking forward to hopefully having another class with you. And I want you all to please stay safe, wash your hands, do the right things, and please stay in touch. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve you this semester as your professor. Thank you all so much for your time. Appreciate all of you. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.